You see, there was this couple. They lived long ago and far away in the middle of a forest. He was a woodcutter, and she did everything she could to help him out, to be a partner. And the two of them, they would never be rich, but they had a roof over their head, and they had plenty to eat, and all that they longed for. And I'm sure you've heard this in stories before. All that they longed for was a child. But year after year went by, and no child came. Until, well, the wife, she thought, I think it's too late for me. And she was sitting by the fireside, and she was sobbing when her husband came in. And he loved her so much. And he put his arms around her, and he started to sing. I wish I had a wind, I'd bring it by. A gentle western wind to dry your eyes. A southern wind to keep you from your crying. And I'm still trying to make you smile. Well, she did stop crying after that. And as she smiled at her husband, a warm wind did blow through their house. And that year, they were blessed with a baby girl. And you can imagine, this baby, so anticipated, so loved. They named her Rose. Daddy called her Rosie. And they were so thrilled. They still only had very modest means, but they felt rich. And as that little girl grew, if she skinned her knee or stubbed her toe or found an animal who'd been hurt and she would cry, well, her daddy would sing to her. I wish I had a wind, I'd bring it by. And her mother would gather her up, and the three of them, well, they'd just fill that house with love and song. And she would stop crying. And so it went, until the year that Rose turned 8. And that winter, her father started to cough. And he never could get rid of it. And he got more and more ill until at last he had to stay in bed. And when he knew he was not much longer for the world, he called his Rosie to him and he said, Rosie, it's not fair, but I'm not going to be here anymore. And you and your mom, you're going to have to work together. And as much as she will take care of you, you're going to have to take care of her as well. And Rose, she promised that she would. And after her father died, the two, they worked very hard together, and as much as Rose's mother looked after her, she tried to do for her mom as well. But when Rosie grew into her teenage years, something happened to her mother's mind and heart. She grew suspicious. She said, I am sure that you are sneaking out to meet boys. I am sure there's a man that you are sneaking out to meet, and you are going to leave me just like your father did. Well, Rose, after a while, she just stopped answering her mother. No, but after she said that about her dad, she just wouldn't talk. And so her mother took to taking one of her own long gray hairs and tying it across the threshold of her daughter's bedroom and checking it every morning. And it was always there until the morning when it wasn't. Rose, I know that you have snuck out to meet someone. Who is it? And her daughter would not answer her. So she started to scheme and plan. And after about a month, she thought, tonight's the full moon. I'm going to pretend to go to sleep, but I will stay up and I will listen. And if she sneaks out of the house, I will follow her. And sure enough, she said goodnight to her daughter. She snuck back downstairs, and she heard a little after midnight the unmistakable sounds of someone sneaking out of her daughter's room and down the stairs and out the door, and she snuck just as quietly right after her. And she followed her daughter on a winding path all the way into the forest. And she went into the forest, and as she crossed into the darkness, she could hear her daughter singing. And as she got closer, she could see that her daughter had her back to her mother, but she was holding someone, and she was singing, "I wish I had a wind, I'd bring it by." Well, to hear that song again, her mother was so shocked she just sat down on a boulder nearby, and somehow, as she listened to the song, she fell asleep. And when she woke up, her daughter was gone. She went back to the house, and her daughter was back in bed just as though she'd never left. And the next morning she said, "I followed you, I saw you in the forest, who was that?" And her daughter wouldn't answer her. And she thought, well, I'll try something else. And so she took some tar pitch, and she spread it on the front step. And this time when she heard her daughter sneak out a little after midnight, she waited until she was sure she was gone. And then she went out with a lantern, and she saw those sticky footprints. She followed them in a winding path to a different section of the forest. And she waited at the edge of the forest until she could hear her daughter's voice die away, so she wouldn't fall asleep again with a hypnotic song. She came in with the lantern to the forest, and as she looked, she saw her daughter. And she was holding someone in her arms, and this time she could see her dead arm. And in her arms, wrapped around both of them, was the scales of a blue and green and black snake. And she was holding the head of this enormous snake in her arms and gazing into the green eyes on the black head of the snake. And she looked entranced. And her mother didn't even stop to think. She got so angry, she said, "Stay away from my daughter!" And that snake looked right at Rose's mother and opened his huge jaws and clamped them right on Rose's thigh and circled his body all the way down her leg. And her mother ran to her and picked her up, snake and daughter and all, and ran back to home. That's all she could think of, was getting her daughter home. And the whole way there, Rose was saying, "No, Mama, please, please, don't hurt the snake. The snake is my love, my own true love. I've given him my heart. Please don't hurt this snake." She laid her out in front of the fire, and she said, "This snake has poisoned you." And the snake unclamped his jaw and slithered to a corner of the room and coiled up. And then, to Rose's mother's surprise, he spoke, "I would never hurt your daughter." Well, instead of making her feel better, it only increased her anger, and she looked around and she saw the axe that her husband, the woodcutter, had used, and it was there on the mantle above the fire, and she grabbed it and she chopped the head off of that snake, and her daughter collapsed. And she ran to Rose. She said, "Oh, Rose, I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me. I'm so sorry. I was so angry." And her daughter's brown eyes opened and looked at her so reproachfully. But from behind the two women, they heard someone sing, "I wish I had a wind, I'd bring it by." And they turned around, and there, standing there, was a tall, beautiful man with curling black hair in coils down past his shoulders. He was dressed all in blue and green and black, and he was singing. And he reached out his hand for Rose, and she said, "Is it you?" And he said, "Yes, yes. Don't be angry with your mother. You see, I am ashamed to admit it, but 10 years ago, I was a young and feckless prince in my mother's kingdom, and I dallied with the hearts of many women. And one of those ladies was a powerful sorceress, a serpent sorceress, and she cursed me to live in snake form until I could find one who would love me as I am, and another who would kill me without my asking. So you see, it's because of your mother that we can be together." And Rose, she embraced her love. And her mother said, "What about me?" And the prince, he said, "You may choose any mansion that you would like, wherever you would like. We will supply you with servants and companionship and anything you wish. You'll never have to work another day in your life." And so he took his Rosie home to his mother's kingdom, and she, of course, welcomed them both back. And in due time, Rose and her prince became the rulers of that land. And her mother chose a beautiful mansion on a mountain with a warm southwesterly wind. Not too close, but not too far. And she never had to work another day in her life. And she always had as much companionship as she could wish. So they say that she lived happily all the days of her life as well. Thank you. And